Hello and welcome to Cooking the Books with Heather. Today it is the end of summer and I had a ton of tomatoes. Some of them were getting a little bit past their prime, so they've been sitting in the refrigerator looking for something to do with them. And I've decided I'm going to be making stewed tomatoes from Vivian Howard's cookbook, Deep Run Roots. I haven't made a lot of tomato recipes from this book before, but we're going to make these. I've already got some butter melted over medium heat in a either a 4 to 6 quart saucepan or a Dutch oven, heavy. This is an enameled cast iron. And I've got some onions, yellow onions in a small dice that we're going to cook in here for about 10 minutes. We just want them to start cooking and caramelize slightly. We're also going to add part of the salt from the recipe. I'm going to get those stirred up a little bit right now, get the salt mixed in, and we're going to let those go for about 10 minutes. I'll let you know about how long it takes until I think they're ready in just a second. So when you come back, these should be a little bit brown, a little bit caramelized, and starting to cook. But we're at about 10 minutes right now, and I'm not seeing really any browning. So I'm going to let them sit for a few more minutes, and we'll see what they look like then and how long it takes. So it's been 18 minutes now, and we're starting to see some brown. So I'm going to call that lightly caramelized. And we're going to add some more ingredients, not quite all of them, but most of the rest of them. Here I have quite a lot of tomatoes. I peeled them, just made a little X on the bottom, dumped them in boiling water briefly, took them out. The peel comes right off. She does not say you have to peel them and does not give a procedure for that. All over the internet. Find it if you want to. I decided I wanted to peel mine. I don't like the little pieces of peel. So these are diced. I went for a pretty large dice. And all of the juices, all of the seeds and everything is in here. We're gonna add this first. One of the things that I don't like is when a recipe gives you a number of things, but those things can vary in size, like the number of onions and the number of tomatoes. And what if my tomatoes are smaller than yours or bigger than yours, and onions? It doesn't really matter. You can probably do this with whatever amounts you want, but you have to the other things you'll have to adjust. We have onions and butter and tomatoes and some salt in here now. Let's give this a quick stir. My tomatoes were cold, so it'll take them a little while to come up to a boil, but that is what we're going to be looking for. But we have to add some more things. So we've got the rest of the salt in the recipe and some, she calls them chili flakes, red pepper flakes, whatever they're called where you get them, pretty much the same thing. Red chili flakes. We have some garlic that has been sliced thin, not minced. And then we have some light brown sugar, which is interesting. I've mostly seen people put just plain granulated sugar in tomatoes, but usually it helps to cut the acidity. But we're also going to be adding some vinegar. This is just like a standard red wine vinegar, nothing too special. You do use what you like. There we go. Let me put this over here. And then I'm going to stir this up. And we have some basil. So it is end of summer and my basil's going crazy. And she says to use just a large stem of fresh basil. And we're just going to drop this in here as is and kind of let it marry with all of these ingredients and infuse its flavor. I think eventually we're going to be taking that out. So now we're going to cover this and bring it up to a boil. So that might take a few minutes for me. I'm going to turn the heat up just a little bit to kind of bring it to a boil faster, because like I said, my tomatoes were very cold. All right, so my tomatoes are all boiling. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna leave the lid on. I'm gonna put the lid back on, but I'm gonna turn it back down to medium because I was just trying to get them up to a boil. So I'm gonna turn them back down to medium, and we're gonna boil these for 30 minutes. And we'll be back when that's all done. These have been boiling away with the lid on. I've only checked on them a couple times for 30 minutes. And now it's time to add the last ingredient. So, so you can see the basil is all wilted in there. I'm gonna wait until it cools off to take that out, because I'm not eating these right now. So the last thing we need to do is add some breadcrumbs. These are fresh, and she says not fresh. They're homemade, and she says preferably homemade. And we need to let these boil in here for about 5 minutes, and then it will all be done. So I keep the end pieces of my bread, I throw them in the freezer, and when I have sort of a sheet pan's worth, I dry them out, toast them a little bit in the oven, and then run them through the food processor to make fine crumbs, and then I have breadcrumbs whenever I need them. So that's what that was, just my regular sandwich bread. So, and then I can also defrost those bread pieces and make croutons and cut them up, toast them in a pan or in the oven with some oil and some spices, and really delicious. Good way to reuse your bread. So we're just gonna let these go for about 5 minutes, and that'll help thicken it up. Now we're not gonna eat this right now. She says, obviously they're good right now, but they're even better the next day. So I will definitely taste these as they are, but my plan is to use them for breakfast tomorrow. And you'll probably see that as our next video. But I will show you what these look like when they're done in another 4 minutes or so. And we'll be all ready, and we'll let you know what we think of them right after this. On this episode of Cooking the Books with Heather, you watched me make stewed tomatoes from Vivian Howard's Deep Run Roots. I tried them right after we made them. I just tasted them. We didn't really eat them then. And she says they are even better the next day. And I do agree with her. I think they were better. We refrigerated them overnight and then used them in another recipe this morning. And they were really, really flavorful. All the onions and the garlic and the basil and the chili flakes. The chili flakes, I didn't find it spicy, although one of my children did. It was really just sort of a back of your throat kind of. You could feel it. I could feel it a little bit. My husband is like, I didn't notice it at all. There's a very small amount of chili flakes in, and she says her recipe makes a generous 5 cups. Mine was definitely between 5 and 6 cups. And like I said, it's all a number of tomatoes, so it depends on how big your tomatoes are. I'm sure you can fudge that a little bit. And in fact, in this recipe and the next recipe that we did, it really looks like she used some cherry tomatoes in hers, which is absolutely fine. Use what you have. Whatever, I'm sure it will be delicious. I skinned mine. You don't have to if you don't want to do that, and if you don't mind having the skins in your result, whatever. But we found these very delicious, super easy. I mean, there's a lot of chopping of, since I skinned the tomatoes, that was a little extra step. Wasn't necessary, chopping the tomatoes. But other than that, really just kind of put it on the stove. Took probably all told about an hour, a little bit longer on the onions than she says, but that's kind of always the case with caramelizing, in my experience anyway. So, but it doesn't take that long. And then there's enough for at least 2 different uses for like what I would use these for. But she said she uses them sort of like ketchup, sort of like marinara. It does, the flavor does remind me a lot of marinara. And if it's too thick or too thin for you, you can always boil it down a little bit, reduce it a little bit more. But the breadcrumbs really do help to thicken it up quite a bit. Also, she says if you don't want to do gluten, you can use cornmeal to thicken it up. And also you could always leave the starch out and just have a much looser end result, and probably need to boil it down a little bit longer if you want to use it as she does in many of the recipes. Although there aren't that many recipes that use it in here, we did use it for another one, which you can see next week. So if you enjoyed watching me make this, please give me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and come back and watch me make something with this next week.